Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to see if you have flat back syndrome. And in this video we're going to cover what exactly is flat back syndrome, how can you really see if you're in it, and how can you begin to get out of it. So what exactly is flat back syndrome? Flat back syndrome refers to the lower back or the lumbar spine, and normally we should see a nice moderate curve back here. But when the lumbar spine, look, just watch the blue part here, not the black part. When the lumbar spine flattens out completely, there is a flattening of it which can cause problems in the lower back, in the hips, even possibly up through your whole spine, including your neck, that you do not want. So one of our first assessments to see if you have a flat lumbar spine is just taking a side view, just like I demonstrated, standing normally. We're not trying to move anything here, and just seeing how your low back is. And we're trying to assess if there is flatness, or even what you're going to notice in some people is a rounding like this of their whole spine, which definitely means that they have a flat back. So we're going to say if they do have a rounded spine, they do have also a flat back syndrome. We just refer to that as one category for what we're doing here today. So that's our first test to see if you have flat back syndrome. Now I have to warn you though that I do want you to watch the upcoming videos, because just because you don't get a positive for this test or any of the other tests today doesn't mean that you don't have flat back syndrome. And I'm going to go into why that is a little bit later, but follow me through the additional tests here, okay? So the next test is going to be bending over and seeing if there's any hyperflexibility of that lumbar spine, because this doesn't necessarily guarantee that we have a flat back syndrome, but it can put us at a higher risk for having flat back syndrome. So I want you to bend over and really bend over as far as you can, and we're looking to see that the lumbar spine there flattens out, but we don't want this to be excessive. We don't want a ton of rounding, okay? So we're looking for the total roundedness there, and if it's a lot, you're at a higher risk for having flat back syndrome. So the treatments in the upcoming videos can help you stay out or get out of this syndrome. Now, the next portion of this test concerns looking at the individual spinal segments. So what that means is that each one of these segments here represents a vertebrae that sometimes for people, they will have damage at one of these segments, and you'll notice that there's a bump. So even for me, there's a bump at L2, L3 segment, and you can see it. It's hard to see it in the camera there, but that's what I'm showing you in the picture of this segment here. And if you can feel a larger bump across any segment of the lumbar spine, that means there likely has been damage at that point, and there very likely has been a flattening of that portion, which, as we're going to go into a little bit later, we need to address and make sure that we are not bending too much at that point. So let's start to go through some of these corrections. If you find that that lumbar spine is flat and they may be okay up here, or they might even be bent over, we want to start to get tall and start to have a little bit of curve in that spine. Now, there is an exception to this rule. If you have high iliac crest, which basically means your hip bones here are very high compared to your belt line, and the way that you can tell is if your belt line in your pants, assuming they fit you normally, is a lot higher than 1 inch, then you may have what's called a structural flat back. And what that means is that your hips are so high, just anatomically, that your spine will automatically be flat, and we do not want to correct that. So generally people with higher iliums tend to be taller, and they tend to know that, okay, wow, my pants seem to come very low, or someone might have said this to them, and their belt line just seems to run very low. So again, if the difference between your hips here and your belt line is higher than, generally I found, about 1.5 inches, then you would have elevated hip bones, in which case I do not want you to necessarily correct here. You may need to correct up here, but I don't want you to try to get into an exaggerated lordotic posture here. However, again, let's review. If you are like this or even like this and you have a flat lumbar spine, it's good to get into a little bit of curve, and that can help your spine absorb more forces and be more resilient to avoid injury or damage. So about the other issues, so what if you bent over and your lumbar spine bends really far, okay? In that case, we need to be very careful about bending over, such as when you're washing your face, you're shaving, you're brushing your teeth, you're spitting into the sink, you're even going to the bathroom on the toilet and you're sitting down on the toilet. You gotta make sure that when you bend over, that you're not excessively bending in that region. So I definitely recommend that we don't go into even beyond the flattening posture. There's some people that can bend really far here. Flat is okay if you're sitting down. Extended is okay. Any one of those two are fine, but I don't want you super rounded whenever you're sitting down, okay? And that could be also include sitting on the floor, meditation, playing with your kids. We really want to watch out for those postures. So the other factor is this. If you found that you have a spot which is a little bit bigger than the rest of the other segments along your lower back, those spots are really important to watch. So you need to make sure that when you bend over, you're not bending at those points. So when you're doing your exercises, if you're sitting on the toilet, if you're sitting on the floor, if you are bending over, do not bend at that spot, because it's very likely that you already are bending at that spot, and that's probably what contributed to the formation of extra tissue on that segment in the first place, is that you just bent over too much in that spot. And that will likely be the cause of your problems, and the symptoms are the site of your problems and pain in the future if you keep bending over without watching how you bend over. So it's critical that we don't bend over at those spots which are larger than the other spots, okay? So if you have any questions at all, I'm happy to help. Please subscribe to my channel if you got anything out of this. Thanks for watching.